one. He has a priority, a primacy of some sort, and he's the one who answered the question that Jesus asked his students, who do you say that I am? Because some people were saying that Jesus was John the Baptist, raised from the dead. Others thought he was Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. None of that was right. And then Jesus said, who do you say that I am? Our people say that's a doctrinal question. We don't do doctrine, we just do Christian living. That's, with great respect, very stupid and very ignorant. The master rabbi, Jesus, wanted to know, who do you say I, Jesus, the Messiah, am? And Peter answered, representing the group, the leader. He's the outspoken one who eventually ran away at the time of the cross. That was a low point in his life. But he was the outspoken one who said, you are the Messiah. That's the way we translate it in my translation. Not the Christ, because it's become an almost useless word in Spanish, Jesucristo. It's too vague to be clear. So the Messiah, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. How easily he could have said, you're God, of course. You're God, the second member of the Trinity. And Jesus would not even have understood what that meant. That would have just been nonsense. So take your Bible and read it as a Jewish piece with the identity of Jesus as the Messiah. That means the King of Israel. If you're claiming to be the Messiah, you're going to rule the world. So what have we done in churches? We've said, no, the goal is to fly off to heaven, to play harps on clouds. That's ridiculous. Jesus is going to rule the world. That's why you're praying, your kingdom come. We need the kingdom, you're saying. Look at this world. We need the kingdom. May your kingdom come. May your will, because God's will is not being done now. It's being thwarted, with God's permission, that is, by the devil, who is deceiving the entire world. I should count up for next Sunday. How many times did Jesus say, beware of false prophets? How many times? Many times. Be on guard. You might be misled by your preachers. You've got to be on guard, because many will say in that day, I hope people listen to this one, many will say, Lord, look what we did. We went to church faithfully. We did all that tithing. We were faithful, only to be greeted with this awful reply. No, you weren't. You didn't even know what you were doing. I didn't recognize you. You didn't really recognize me. That would put everybody, you think, on the spot saying, boy, I want the truth at all costs. The truth and nothing but the truth. That's what I need in order to be saved. I get it. Otherwise, one would be lost. That's the alternative.
Especially at this time of the year.
Especially at this time of the year when we're coming to a very paganized version of the faith. Christmas has nothing whatsoever to do with Jesus. Wasn't born at that time. It's a paganization because people didn't like the original Jewish faith. They said, this is no good. We don't want a Jewish thing. That's not going to sell. That's not good salesmanship, offering a Jewish Jesus. We need to take the pagan holidays and just call them Christian, and then we'll pretend that this is Christian. But what if it isn't? What if, in fact, the creed that they recite in the church is that Jesus is man, but not a man? They don't even know. Tell your Methodist friends. I engage them in conversation. Write to the newspaper. Write to everybody. Tell them all, and you'll win some, that it's nonsense to say Jesus was man, but not a man. But that's what they believe. That's what your friends believe. Go after them. See if we can persuade some. We're trying to do that.
A good way to do it is when someone at work says, what are you doing this Christmas? And you say, we don't do Christmas.
No.
And then they say, what? I've never heard that.
You're a Jehovah's Witness.
That's a good way of...
Yep, it's one of many ways of engaging people in conversation. But I like the one about Jesus is man, but not a man. They don't even know that that's what they believe. I mean, how bad is that? How mindless is it? But that's what Jesus complained about. He said constantly, the traditions that you have absorbed are wrong. In vain they worship. It's futile, waste of time. In vain they worship, teaching for doctrines, human doctrines, instead of biblical ones. That's the challenge for all of us. So we keep on the search for truth. And you out there help us week by week with good ideas and suggestions, and we appreciate all of that very much because we're also listening carefully. Okay, we're going to 1 Peter then, chapter 5. And you'll see all of these themes that I've been outlining here in my opening statement, reminding us of Judge Janine Piro, who has her open. That was my open for the day. Now in 5:1, I'm reading from the New American Standard Version, and you'll see also all sorts of connections with what we've been saying. 5:1 goes like this. Therefore, I exhort the elders among you, as your fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Messiah, and a partaker also of the glory that is to be revealed.
Shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, and not for sordid gain, but with eagerness.
Not lording it over those entrusted to your care, but as examples to the flock.
And when the head shepherd comes, your reward will be a never-ending share in his glory and honor.
And verse 5 says, you younger men likewise, be subject to your elders. All of you clothe yourself with humility toward one another, for God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Let's stop there for a moment. We've got a quotation there. In my New American Standard Bible, when you've got all capitals in a series of words, it means it's been quoted from somewhere. So where do we get God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble? Where's that from?
Proverbs 3:34.
All right, right in my marginal reference. So when you're buying your nephew, grandson, whatever, is a nice new Bible, when you get a New American Standard updated version, will do as well as any. But buy the one with the side margins, so it will refer to the verses the Bible writers refer to. That way you do your Bible study along with Peter in this case. So I'll ask Sarah to read. What does Proverbs 3:34 say exactly?
Though he scoffs at the scoffers, yet he gives grace to the afflicted.
Good. God is opposed to the proud. He scoffs at the scoffers. God is mocking those who doubt the existence of God or think that the creation just happened from nothing. He mocks those, but he gives grace to the humble. I get that's from Proverbs 3:34. Peter perhaps read that morning. Peter, I remind you, is reflected in the Gospel of Mark. Perhaps you didn't know that. When you're reading the Gospel of Mark, you're hearing what Peter had given Mark, because Mark, in this very chapter, is said to be the son of Peter. Well, he's not literally the son of Peter. Glance down in your Bible to verse 13 of the chapter we're doing. She was in Babylon, probably, chosen together with you, sends greetings, and so does my son Mark. And there he did not mean his natural son, I think, but his spiritual son. So Mark's gospel, you'll be happy to know, gives you another apostolic view. You've got Matthew, he was an apostle. Then you've got Mark reflecting Peter. And then you've got Luke, who was not an apostle, but a very shrewd and intelligent observer and a doctor, and was giving us then a very cleverly worded and a good witness account of what went on. But Mark then and Peter are very much in line, and you'll see themes in common in the Gospel of Mark with the letter of Peter, 2 letters of Peter. Okay, back to 1. Therefore I exhort the elders. I exhort. He doesn't command people in an arbitrary sense. He doesn't lord it over them, because you remember that Jesus said that the rulers of this system lord it over their people. We have dictators. There's a gentleman in Africa right now who's bowing out after a long time, but he was a dictator, clearly. So beware, if you get some power at the workplace or in other situations, do not lord it over those in your charge. But they are nevertheless in your charge, and Peter speaks of himself as a fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ, and a partaker also of the glory that's to be revealed. You see that? The suffering and the history of the past, as it is in the case of Jesus who suffered. But what is the end goal? It's the glory that's coming. It's not going to heaven when you die. So that whole idea of disappearing to heaven when you die, it's just false. You can't preach falsehoods and expect to do well. This is the pattern that you get from Jesus and Peter here. Suffering now, and the object then is to be partaker of the glory. What does that mean? Your face is going to shine like the sun in its strength. That's Daniel 12 verse 3. Quoted by Matthew in 13:43. Jesus loved that text. You are going to be glorified. You are going to shine like the sun in its strength in that future glory of the kingdom. This is basic stuff, but I never heard any of this in Church of England. What went wrong? I sat there, I didn't know about it.
This is the two parts of the gospel. The sufferings of Christ will be the death of Christ, and then, of course, the kingdom.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
The two parts of the gospel.
Yeah.
First the suffering, followed by the glory that's coming. Glory is the same as the kingdom, exactly the same. The glory of the kingdom is coming on the earth at the second coming. So if you think that parousia, I'm going to use this Greek word for the second coming, it's become so confused we need to get it quite clear. The parousia, if you think that was in 1914, you're very gravely off the rails. Don't imagine going door to door and teaching people that the parousia was invisible in 1885, 1914, 1918. Don't set any dates for this century, 25, whatever it might be. You are off the rails. Don't dare set a date for the parousia, because you might mislead some people. Don't ever imagine there's an invisible parousia. That's incredible. The arrival of the king to take over his kingdom is not invisible. That's the one event the devil would love to have invisibility assigned to, isn't it? The one thing the devil doesn't want is the visible coming of Christ to rule the world. So he's trying to get rid of that. So, the parousia is actually invisible. That's just nonsense. Can't get away with that. So, the glory that's going to be revealed. Revealed is a good word. That's the word apocalypsis in Greek. Apocalyptic, apocalypsis. There's a whole book called the Book of Revelation, and it's one of the words for the second coming. The three words for the second coming you should have ready to go all the time. The parousia, that's the arrival of a king, of a dignitary to take over territory. There's apocalypsis, which is revelation. It's going to be revealed. That's a visible thing, not hidden, revealed.
Epiphania.
And then there's Epiphania, which is also the bright, outshining manifestation of Christ. Those three words are used of the second coming, as we call it, the second arrival, not presence, not invisible presence. That's just fundamentally confusing. Don't use the word presence for the parousia. Of course you can be present and absent, we know that. But when the king arrives, he's not just invisibly present. That's just nonsense. So help your people see that. And we'll then relate to Peter as he states that we should be partakers of the glory that's going to be revealed at the parousia, the one second coming of Jesus. Then the order then to elders. In the Bible then there's one rank really of leadership. An elder is an overseer, is a bishop, is a shepherd, is a pastor. You can have apostles, you have the 12 in the New Testament, who have special accrediting signs. To be an apostle at the level of the 12, you've got to have seen Jesus personally. Well, I haven't. If somebody claims to be an apostle, you say, oh, well, when did you actually see Jesus? That's the test point. And secondly, have you got the accrediting signs and wonders of an apostle? If you are an apostle at the level of 12, you could be laying hands on the sick and they'd be leaping out of their wheelchairs. We saw that in the New Testament and in the ministry of Jesus. But today we do not see that. So there cannot be apostles like the 12. That's finished. But they left us the record then of the faith in the Bible. So we're trying to deal with the apostolic faith as far as we can within the limits of those who are not apostles. Not at the level of Paul and Peter, who had accrediting signs and wonders. Didn't Peter raise some lady from the dead? Can you imagine that? Wasn't it Tabitha, Dorcas, who had died? And they're all weeping and reflecting on the fact that she had made all these wonderful pieces of clothing. Peter says, no problem. I don't think he said no problem exactly, but he went up there, laid hands on her, and she rose from the dead. That would get your attention, you think? I believe it. It happened.
It's interesting, the only time elder is used in the singular, it's in reference to Jesus and not to a one elder church system.
Well, this one is a fellow elder. Peter is calling himself an elder there.
In verse 1.
In 1. He's a fellow elder.
With a singular there.
That's singular, that's elder. Peter is an elder in the church. He's also an
You're
apostle.
referring to verse 4, right?
Verse 1 too has elders in this paraphrase. Verse 5 has elders. When we talk about church, it's elders, not the elder.
Well, in fact, unfortunately, that's not going to work. It's singular, isn't it? Fellow. I, Peter, exhort the elders, plural, among you, as your fellow elder. He's a singular elder, and there are lots of elders.
Right.
And he's exalting his fellow.
Elders, right?
In the first account, it's elders, plural, and then it's singular in the second line. Peter is singular, he's a fellow elder. But my point is that the elder rank, you see, goes for pastors, it means overseers, and it means bishops also. What we've created in the system, which is really a makeover system that went wrong from the 2nd century, is a hierarchy, a super bishop, known as the Pope, and bishops and so on, who are over the local elders. You don't need all of that hierarchy. Certainly you have apostles in the New Testament, you can't have them now. You cannot have a Pope who is equal with the apostles. That's impossible. The Pope doesn't have the accrediting signs of Jesus, does he? Nor has he seen Jesus, that's quite clear. So, Peter's an elder. He's saying to his fellow elders, supervisors, bishops, same thing, presbyters, all these words have the same rank. And you're a supervisor. I think that would be the best term, supervisor.
In the book of Acts, by the way, elders, plural, appears 7 times.
Yes.
8 times.
Yes.
8.
Lots of elders.
9
Each
times.
one of them is a singular elder, and then there are lots of them. Shepherd the flock. There's the pastor word, verse 2. Shepherd the flock of God among you. Shepherd it. Exercising oversight. So you do have then the capacity to be overseers. That would be a good word today, wouldn't it? Supervisor? Overseers. We know what that is from the workplace. Oversight, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God. You can be paid or not paid in the Bible. There's no hassle over that. Paul was not paid, chose not to be paid, that's fine. You can pay an elder if you wish to, if you have the capacity. Some churches obviously cannot do that, some can. It's completely voluntary. You have an option to pay or not to pay. And Paul actually said in one place that the man who works at the word and eldership work is worthy of double hire, because he's doing responsible work. But he doesn't have to take that. He has an option. So there are all sorts of opportunities, one way or the other there. Not under compulsion, not because you have to do it, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, according to God, or his will. Not for sordid gain. I mean, that's the worst possible disaster. If you're being an elder for the sake of getting some expensive jet, or $500 shoes, that is a disaster. That's the time for you to stop and say, what am I doing there? Because that's a great temptation, sordid gain, in that second verse there. Nor yet as lording it over. Just go back to the passage in Matthew where they talk about being rulers in the kingdom, in Matthew 19.
To sit on the right hand.
What's that, sit on the right hand?
Is it the one?
We can do that one, yes. What's that in Matthew 19?
20, let's see.
Matthew 19.
No.
They deal with this lording it over people very nicely in that chapter.
Matthew 20:25.
20:25. That'll be fine. 20:25. Okay. The two brothers had asked if they could have key positions in the kingdom. First note that there are key positions in the kingdom. It's a kingdom with rank. That's in verse 23. And then 24, the 10 became indignant. You see, they thought that the two brothers, James and John, were being a bit too proud of themselves and were asking for special positions. Jesus then called them to himself in verse 25 of Matthew 20. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles, the nations, right, the foreign unconverted nations, lord it over them. That's their tendency. I'm sure some do better than others. There's a tendency for leadership to be lording it over, and their great men exercise authority over them. There are great people. There are great people in the kingdom. There are less great in the kingdom. There is rank in the kingdom. But Jesus said in verse 26, not this way among you, not to be like this among you, but whoever wishes to become great. Oh, notice that. You can wish to become great, that's not wrong. But if you want to be great, as James and John did, and that wasn't wrong in itself, then you've got to be the servant of all. You've got to be the servant of all, the slave of all. And Jesus himself was the ultimate slave actually washing the feet of the disciples as a symbol of that slavehood. Verse 27 says, whoever wishes to be first, it's okay to wish to be first, if your talents lead in that direction, or opportunities or whatever, but you'd better be a slave, i.e. servant. Slave is a perfectly good word in the New Testament, by the way. Unfortunately, slave for us has all sorts of baggage with it, but slave, doulos in Greek, is a servant, somebody who works for somebody else. And 28, just as the Son of Man, the human being, that's capital H, capital M, the human being, that's who Jesus is, did not come to be served. Well, he did come to be served also, secondarily at least, he was served, that's certainly true. But not primarily to be served, but primarily to serve. And what greater service could it be than to offer your life as a ransom, that's to say a substitutionary death on the cross. I'm doing my translation over, and I was very struck with the fact that at the crucifixion, after being nailed to the stake, he died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, after 6 hours being tortured on a cross. And when he finally died, it says he uttered a huge cry, yelled out, and died. And they were surprised he died so early, because the other prisoners, one on either side, not two on either side, one on either side, were still alive, and they had to break the bones of those ones. What awful savagery that is. Jesus was already dead, and they were surprised at that. Okay.
That saying is followed by a very good example with the 2 blind men.
Yes.
And
yes.
The crowd told them to shut up.
Yes. Isn't that nice?
So that's a good example of what he's talking about.
Right. You can read that. Yes,
a question here, Anthony, about... you mentioned the New American Standard Version. Someone's asking about, is that the recommended version?
I don't know if it's recommended. It'll do as well as any NASU, the updated NSV, more or less the same. They're all good and bad translations. Some paraphrases are very useful here and there and very bad in others. I don't recommend you read the King James at all, because the King James is not only from inadequate manuscripts, some blatant errors, but you don't speak English like that, and that makes it unreal and churchy. Don't read the King James. You don't say thee and thou. It sort of removes it from reality. You don't want to do that. So NASU is fine. Revised Standard Version, New Revised Standard Version. I like the NEB, the New English Bible, very much. There are many good translations. People say, what's the best one? I don't know if there is a best, but there are some worse than better. And the best are NRSV, RSV, if you happen to have access to a Williams New Testament, it's very good. So there's a lot of good stuff around there, thousands of different translations. None is perfect, and some of them are horribly imperfect, like the King James in 1 John 5:7, which has a blatant forgery about the Trinity there. In 1 John 5:7, been removed from every single Bible in modern times. It's a blatant forgery to promote the Trinity. That's in the King James.
How about when it comes to Spanish Bibles? Are you familiar?
I wouldn't know. I should think Dios habla hoy is a fairly good paraphrase, is it? What do they use in
I prefer the Jerusalem.
Jerusalem Bible would be fine.
Spanish is very good. Right. Question about apostles. You were talking about apostles on the level of the 12.
Yes.
We don't have today.
No.
Why can't followers, I guess not apostles as such, why can't followers perform miracles today?
Well, let them demonstrate that. If that's a guilt trip in any way, why aren't they, and should they be? I don't know the answer fully to that, except that God doesn't have to go on doing those signs and wonders. He can. He certainly can do it, but the fact is it's not happening. What do we make of that? Are we all guilty because we're not laying hands on the sick? There is a level of accredited signs and wonders that you cannot expect. The apostles are at a level of intensity, certainly in the apostolic time. They were. I'm not saying for a moment that God cannot bring somebody out of a wheelchair. I haven't seen it happen. I've heard claims often. On the other hand, that opens up the whole area of what you do when you're sick. And a lot of what is prescribed as good medicine isn't good medicine. So you're going to have to be very wise in that area. And there are all sorts of things we can do for ourselves in terms of eating well. So it's a science in itself. But I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that God ever said in the Bible the miracles have to cease and cannot happen. Fact is, they appear to have ceased in that way, unless you can show that somebody has those accrediting signs. I haven't seen it myself. I don't know. What would they suggest? We could ask. It's
about what they're teaching as well.
Of course, if the miracles promote error in the teaching, that's unlikely to be a genuine miracle. And we must always say that just as the people in Pharaoh's time could turn rods into, what was it? They were able to do
serpents.
Serpents.
Snakes. Some Omar says that he saw a news reporting wherever he's from.
Mm-hmm.
He showed a Catholic man who prayed for a sick woman and she was healed.
Yeah. So what does that prove then? Catholicism is correct? I don't think so. Don't forget that Jesus said, many will claim to have done miracles, signs and wonders. They will claim not even to have been recognized. So the presence of a miracle proves nothing by itself. We would have to have promoted truth. And some wise professor, when I was in college, said to me, you'll find that Roman Catholics who speak in languages, in tongues, and claim it, they tend to love Mary with even more fervor. I thought that was an interesting remark. It didn't enable them to get rid of the illusion under which they were suffering, that they were speaking foreign languages when they weren't. It simply made them keener on Mary than before. Now that might be a lesson. However, let's not say that God cannot. I think perhaps we're rather weak in that area. We may perhaps be guilty of not expecting more miracles than we do find. But we're so terribly short on information on how to live well. Maybe God says, you're going to reap what you sow. That's the whole subject on its own, which is very fascinating.
Can you talk about verse 5?
Yes.
I don't know if we have.
No.
There seems to be a very fine balance between humility and leadership.
Yeah.
So, Jesus is often called the servant king.
Yes, he is.
But that's a difficult thing, right? Because many people who follow someone want to be led.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if then you turn around at times and act the role of a servant, many people might maybe be confused or maybe even lose their esteem for the leader. So can you talk about how we're supposed to be elders and people are supposed to be subject to us, but at the same time we have to, Peter says, it's a sort of fine balance.
Well, it's fine balance, obviously, yes. And verse 4, though, speaks of the chief shepherd, the chief pastor. You see the word is pastor there. Jesus is the chief pastor. So your pastor is Jesus, if that's comforting. Your pastor is really Jesus. He's the chief pastor. When he appears, then you will receive the crown. Can you imagine yourself with a crown on your head and being told to lead and to rule over a certain number of cities? That's the reality of the coming kingdom. You don't hear it preached very much. Crown of glory, crown of the kingdom. There it is. Once again, he compares the suffering of the present time with the glory, and the glory is most important. That's why the devil really did a number on us when he said that your object is to disappear to heaven to play a harp on a cloud. That is as false as it gets. We should worry about people who believe that because it's very false. It's wrong.
Sometimes
yes.
when somebody dies, you'll hear, oh, she's received her crown,
yes.
right? In heaven. But this tells us when we receive our crown.
Absolutely.
When?
It's clear to you. We have to try to help people. Write to the newspaper. Engage the public at every point. Why are we talking about going to heaven when we die when this talks about gaining our crown at the second coming? Right? Great point.
My version uses the term head shepherd for Jesus,
Yes.
which I love because we all know that a shepherd wants nothing but the very best for his sheep. He is guiding them, trying to protect them, and ultimately he would pay the biggest price of all, which would be to give his life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a wonderful picture
Absolutely.
of wanting nothing but the best for us.
Yep. Head shepherd.
Protecting us from the evil.
Head pastor, head pimeen, it's the word for shepherd, it's the word for pastor. So it's useful to think of Jesus as your shepherd, as your pastor. He's looking after you. I'm not expert in sheep, but I believe if we lived on farms, we'd understand the power of this. He's very concerned about all the sheep, and if one goes astray, he leaves the others alone to go after that one.
Just on the KJV, it's very poetic. There is that to be said for it.
Yes, it's poetic, but at what cost
Someone
to clarity?
said, what's better to read, a poetic and good-sounding Bible that tickles the ears, so to speak, or a plain modern version that interprets truth and God's
Well, I obviously am not attached to the King James, because it's not the language that you speak today, especially for children. It involves some sort of a filter between their understanding and what's being read. We don't need that. It just adds to the complication. So I like the NEB very much, the New English Bible, and also the Roman Catholic Bible is in many cases very good. The Jerusalem Bible is the Roman Catholic Bible, very good. The New Jerusalem Bible, or even the NAB, the New American Bible, done by scholars of different denominations, massively good. But by all means have alternative versions to read for variety, that's wonderful.
Randy, how do we understand titles for leaders in the church, like elders, I guess, when Jesus says in Matthew 23,
yes,
do not be called rabbi, do not call anyone on earth your father, do not be called leaders.
Well, obviously there are two different senses there, because Peter is doing that very thing. He's naming himself as an elder. He is an elder. However, there's a slight difference between being the elder and being called the elder. You don't have to go around saying elder so-and-so, pastor so-and-so. It's when you make that the title, much less father so-and-so. Of course, Paul spoke of Timothy as being his son. Paul said, I'm the father of Timothy. And Peter said, I'm the father of Mark here. But there's a difference, I think, between referring to somebody as a teacher. Otherwise, that would be plain contradiction. We know it isn't. You're only to call one absolute teacher Jesus. That's clear.
The context of Matthew 23 is important because he's talking about his Jewish teachers and rabbis.
Right.
How big of hypocrites they are.
Yes.
Because he says they tie heavy things on people.
Yes.
They don't practice what they preach. So the context there says a lot about those verses you...
And they also love the special greetings in the marketplaces.
Verse 6, they love to have the places of honor at banquets and the best seats in the synagogues.
Yes.
They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, what you just said.
Yes.
And for people to call them rabbi.
Yes.
And then it goes on to say, don't like...
That's quite clear. I think that answers Randy's point. It's when you get into the area of being called a special title and you want the special seats and all that. I mean, that's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah,
even common sense would dictate that you don't want to do that.
I'm a pastor and I deserve good tickets.
Oh, that's absurd. Now, I think I get the idea.
What about reverend?
Reverend, I don't like the idea of reverend either. The reverend so-and-so, that's a title borrowed from the church system. Don't need that. That's a title. That's beginning to use a real title, I think, creates the wrong impression. That's a personal thought.
I have to drop that?
Carlos is asking whether Carlos, should drop the title Reverend. I've never called him Reverend. I've never heard anybody call him Reverend. If they did, we would be on him immediately, probably suggested. Carlos is a good name. So if you want to be humorous about this, you can say, what about Elvis Presley? Was he great? Yes, at some level, he was. He insisted on being called Elvis. First name. That's the closest. These people mostly go by the first name. That will do. The rest is all superfluous.
As we get into the end of this, Anthony, the interest in exaltation with the humble nature of the theme here in the opening goes back to Psalm 37, which we have talked about before. where it talks about the proud or the wicked being destroyed.
Yes.
And the humble inheriting the earth. And that appears about 5 times in that Psalm 37.
Yes, it does.
The humble will inherit the land, they will enjoy unlimited peace, verse 11. Verse 22, those God blesses will inherit the land, those he curses will be destroyed.
Yep. Then read on a bit further, it says they will dwell in it forever.
The godly will inherit the land, verse 29, and will live there forever.
Good.
Verse 34, wait for God and keep his way. He will exalt you. There's that exaltation, which is tied to glory reward.
Of course.
He will exalt you to inherit the land. You will see this when the wicked are destroyed. We will see the wicked, by the way, being destroyed.
It's very clear, isn't it? That's not 1914, not much less 1918. It's certainly not 1880 something. So again, I say that system of Bible students or Jehovah's Witnesses is completely off the rails when it comes to the parousia. That's a serious business.
But you know, when you point to verse 29 there, which is important, we will live in the land forever.
Yes.
Are you saying that because in the going to heaven scheme, they teach it as a forever thing, going to heaven?
Yes.
Although they believe in somehow coming.
Well, in some systems maybe they'll come back. I'm not sure about that. But going to heaven at any point is obviously wrong because Jesus is coming back. The danger of the going to heaven thing is you won't be with Jesus. So I've humorously said, why do you want to go to heaven when Jesus won't be there? When you say, well, I'm going to get to heaven, so-and-so's in heaven, he's gone home, God took him or her to heaven, it simply shows that that person has not been enlightened to the truth, and they need the truth.
So some systems teach that you'll remain there forever, and others...
Yes, I would think so, yes.
You rejoin your body, right? Like,
yes. Well, yes.
They do still believe in a resurrection.
They believe in an immortal soul, basically all these systems do. An immortal part of you is in heaven until it's joined again to the body later on. All of that is totally unnecessary confusion. Your children will not appreciate that. The plain fact is that you inherit the earth and you live in the earth forever. That's what the Psalm says. You reign upon the earth, epitisiis, in Revelation 5:10, and you inherit the kingdom under the whole heaven. That's a good one. Revelation, that's Daniel 7:27. The kingdom under the whole heaven in 7:27 of Daniel. You could spend most of your preaching life just dealing with Daniel chapter 7 because there's so little information around there that's clear. Okay, Daniel 7:27.
Someone says, Archbishop Carlos. I'll accept that.
Archbishop Carlos. Right? That's a chief bishop. Like an archangel is a chief angel. So when the Jehovah's Witnesses say that Jesus is an archangel, but not an angel, that's just a failure of simple language. They need to get out a Webster's dictionary and look up a few easy words. This is to say that the systems are nonsense until they get clarified by truth.
So that's okay, child of the 80s. You can call me Archbishop. Milk, no sugar.
Yeah.
In reference to shepherds, someone said, sheep know their shepherd's voice and will follow him. Milk says the Alsace is renowned for sheepdogs, but its spiritual shepherds aren't doing so well.
Okay.
I'm in contact with a few of them, blowing the dog whistle on the system.
Good for you.
Good for you. And he's
Omar
referring to a
says-
geographical place, Alsace.
Right.
That's France.
From which we get the Alsatian,
Oh,
right,
I
which
suppose.
is a shepherd.
Yes.
The German
Oh, good
shepherd,
point,
right?
right. A very fierce one at some
Omar says he put 2 Timothy 2:12 to a JW,
Yes.
and they told me that Paul was talking to another group of people. They
That's
believe
Oh.
that only 144 shall
Yeah.
reign, the rest will be ruled over by them.
That's just a disaster, creating confusion out of what was supposed to be straightforward. Yes, 2 Timothy 2:12 is excellent.
What is it?
If we suffer with them, we're going to rule with them, right? You want to read that for us, sir?
If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he also will deny us.
Yeah. We'll reign with him on the earth, Revelation 5, verse 10, upon the earth. And the Jehovah's Witnesses have the gall to say it should mean over the earth. That's just nonsense. You're going to reign on the earth because that's where Jesus will be, and it's the kingdom under the whole heaven in Daniel 7:27. This isn't so hard. So on the earth means on the earth. Doesn't mean suspended over the earth. How fearfully complicated some of these systems have made easy things. Okay, so the crown of glory, as somebody pointed out, is the when of the future. When the chief pastor appears at his parousia, at his epiphania, at his apocalypsis, then you also will receive an unfading crown of glory. That's a royal thing. These are not just vague terms thrown out. You are royal family in training, and you're going to be recognized publicly as such at this amazing event. God gives grace to the humble. I like that. He's opposed to the proud. So pride then is the root of many evils. That's very true.
Follows, what is it?
It's followed by a fall.
Something like that.
Yes. Pride precedes a fall is a maxim we have in English too. So to be equipped with the real estimate of who you are is good, right? Doesn't mean to say you have to have a false humility or unable to do anything, to be hopelessly inadequate. However, you've got to be very careful not to be more highly exalted than you really are.
Yeah. How do you do that, by the way?
Well, I think
not let your humility be false because you're trying, but it's sort of.
It takes introspection. It takes sitting down, saying, "What are people saying about me?" That's sometimes an indication, and you listen to your critics and see if they have something useful to say. I like 7 though. Casting 6, first of all, though. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. That's powerful. The mighty hand of God, so that he can exalt you. There's the exaltation. You've got the crown of glory, verse 4. You've got the glory in verse 1. Now the exaltation in verse 6. It's massively filled with exaltation language as the end product here. At the proper time, though. And the proper time is not the moment you die. When you die, as we've said often on these sessions, you are in fact rehearsing this every night. As you fall asleep tonight, you're rehearsing death. When you wake up in the morning, you're rehearsing resurrection. That's the laboratory in which you've been placed, that you rehearse death and resurrection every time you fall asleep and expect to wake up in the morning. So there it is, exalt you at the proper time, which is the future resurrection of the dead. 1 Corinthians 15:23 is always at the tip of your tongue because it says that at the parousia, 1 Corinthians 15:23 is brilliant. At the parousia, the Christians will be resurrected. The parousia and the resurrection of the dead are riveted together in Scripture. Woe be to you if you try to pull them apart. If you do that, the whole system is derailed and chaotic, and that's the way it has become often. So, proper time, verse 6. Casting, I like this one. Casting all your trouble, anxiety on him. This is a tender line, isn't it? Because he cares for you. You have a God, as Barbara was talking about, a chief shepherd, Jesus. You have God the Father, who, like any good father, cares for his children. He's very concerned.
Apparently that's literally, it matters to him concerning you.
Yes. Yes. You like that?
Yeah.
Yes.
It is, exactly.
Yeah,
It matters to God concerning you.
My version says, or he cares about what happens to you.
That's good. That good. It matters to God. He's not careless. He's not off there doing his creational thing, whatever that would be. Actually, that makes good sense. And where does the love of a father for his children come from? I mean, fathers and mothers have, generally speaking, a concern for their children, don't they? You see this acted out everywhere. How much more then would be the Father of all creation? He must be intrigued by his creation and very much caring for it. That's a good paraphrase. Then 8, some more commands. I mean, how many imperatives have we got here? Be humble. Don't be lording it over. Be not exalting yourself. Then verse 8, what about this one now? People out there who think there is no devil. Wait a minute. That needs to change today. I hope you'll sit down and get that straightened out after reading this verse. Be sober. That's the opposite of drunkenness. Very much under control. Sober. On the alert. Awake. alert. Because, why? Your adversary, who is this? Your human nature? No, of course not. The devil should have a capital D there. The devil, the Satan, not a Satan, not a devil, not just a demon, although he is a super demon really, but he's the devil prowling around like a roaring lion seeking someone to gobble up. That's not your human nature. One of the most disastrous doctrines ever imagined by Bible students was that the devil is non-existent. He's not out there at all, he's just internally. This is evident nonsense. And we add to the evident nonsense the fact that our millennialism says that the devil has already been bound. Get this. Your friends out here in the Church of Christ are saying the devil has been bound and put in the abyss, or Revelation 20, put in the abyss so that he cannot deceive anybody any longer for a single moment. That will happen in Revelation 20. Can you imagine Peter believing that? Can you imagine Peter saying the devil is prowling around like a roaring lion trying to see whom he can get and destroy, while he's really in the abyss so he can deceive nobody any longer? If that isn't evident nonsense, what would be?
That's James 4:7 as well.
Yes, what does that say, please?
Submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you.
Good.
That's James.
The roaring lion, very good. And in Revelation 20, these are the verses you put together for your friends. You've got a time where the devil has been bound in Revelation 20. In verse 3, it says that Jesus threw the devil, the serpent, the ancient serpent, that's the Genesis serpent, into the abyss, shut it, sealed it over him, so that this devil could not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were finished. And you're telling me, as Church of Christ people will argue strongly, no, the devil has already been bound. So he's at the same time bound and roaring lion out there trying to devour you? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and how does human nature flee from you?
Doesn't make any sense at all.
4:7, it says, he will flee from you if you resist.
Okay, so you have this hub of verses together. Another one would be 1 John 5:18, which says, 1 John 5:18 says, we know that no one who is born of God, that's what Christians should be now, sins continuously. That's the sense there. Not sin of perfection, but it's not habitually sinning. But he who was born of God, that's Jesus, preserves him. And the evil one, that's the devil, does not touch him, cannot touch him. Verse 19, we know that we are of God, and that the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. The whole wide system, whole wide world. That's also Revelation 20 verse 9. If you want to make your point forcibly to your friends, in the very same book of Revelation, which speaks of a time coming when he's bound so he can deceive the nation no longer, that very same book in 12:9, so Revelation 12 verse 9, says that the devil is currently deceiving the entire world.
You know, there's an interesting comment. Ellicott's commentary
Yes.
for James 4:7 on he will flee.
Yes.
And then the commentary quotes the shepherd of Hermas. The devil can tight, but he cannot conquer.
He can do what?
Tight. T-I-G-H-T, I don't know.
No, that's just old English, meaningless.
If therefore you withstand him,
Yeah.
he will flee from you,
Yeah.
beaten and ashamed.
Yeah.
That's the shepherd. But then Ellicott's got the text, so James 4:7 is another proof of the personality of Satan.
Good.
No amount of figures of speech could otherwise interpret it.
Exactly.
I wonder if he was dealing with CTs, Ellicott.
Well, he would have been appalled. A Christadelphian denomination which denies the existence of the devil. Most ordinary readers of the Bible can see there is a devil, the Satan, with the article. There are definitely demons in the New Testament. Jesus spoke to demons. The demons recognized Jesus as the Messiah. So you can ask your Christadelphian friends kindly, please explain the word demon. Look it up in a dictionary. Greek, English, Hebrew, any language you like. Demonia, demons, are supernatural personalities, not human, certainly not animals. They're fallen angels, and they are at pains to try to ruin your life and deceive you. So the roaring lion, I mean, we should watch movies on roaring lions, shouldn't we, to get the idea? There's no such thing as a careless, casual Christian life. You better be alert, because somebody's trying to gobble you up. That reminds me of Luke 8:12. I will mention that one, because one of my favorite verses is Luke 8:12. In the parable of the sower, Jesus said, reported in Luke 8:12, the parable of the sower, when somebody hears the message of the kingdom, the devil is there, ready to snatch away that message of the kingdom, gospel, so that, this is the devil's intention, so that that person would not believe the message of the kingdom and be saved. Ah, I see. You must believe the gospel of the kingdom to be saved. That's interesting. And the devil knows that very well, so he's there ready to snatch away the gospel of the kingdom from that person, because he knows that if that person grasps the kingdom, then they're beginning the Christian life, and then they're going to be saved, and the devil doesn't want you saved. He wants lost. I get that.
Another good point Peter makes, and James.
Yes.
James is interesting, James 4:7, with this one, very good parallels, is that, so how do you resist evil or the devil? Well, many Christians, a majority would say, get a gun.
Oh.
But Peter talks about your faith, so that's how you do it.
Yes.
And then James talks about via your subjection to God.
Yes.
So it's a very interesting way that the apostles are dealing with evil in general, and Satan specifically, that it's not with weapons of war or a handgun at home, but through subjection to God, and through your faith, through your belief that God will help you.
Yes, I dealt with that question in chapter 9 of my Coming Kingdom of the Messiah book. I read it again today. I'd forgotten I'd written this, but chapter 9 speaks of the archbishop who found it impossible that he was blessing the Hiroshima bomb which killed other Christians. And the archdeacon said, only in a madhouse could you imagine that dropping a bomb on another Christian is a Christian thing to do. So don't do it. Stay out of that war business.
The warning in verse 8 indicates that life is such a very, very sobering thing.
Exactly
it is not the happy, clappy thing that is represented.
No. It's a good point. Life is not the happy, clappy thing, Barbara says, as it's represented in some styles of preaching, where you just imagine that you're all these wonderful things and all those wonderful things will happen. That is very far from New Testament Christianity, I think.
Randy says that Peter uses the word sober 3 times in chapter 1,
Wow.
chapter 4, and chapter 5.
Yes.
A good warning for this present evil age.
Good.
A child of the 80s is asking, you were talking about demons. Are demons categorically different from fallen angels?
No, I don't think so. I think they're probably the best one can do. They're probably the product of those marriages between fallen angels and evil women there. Genesis 6, the product of that intercourse presumably produced a reign of demons. Satan is the chief demon. He's in charge of other fallen angels. So the best guess I think we can have, I think it's probably right, but we can be corrected in the future if necessary, that the demons are fallen angels, perverted angels, the result of that ghastly event in Genesis 6, which caused the flood, incidentally. That's when the world really became wicked, when those giants, who were the product of mismarriage between fallen angels and evil women, in this case, human females who were evil, that produced such a disaster in terms of evil that it led to the flood, which, I remind you, not a very happy thought, led to the extermination of all of the human race except 8 people. And God was very sorry he'd made man. He was very upset with what had happened. So this is, as Randy points out, a very sobering thought, isn't it? Very sobering. And Peter uses the word 3 times. Good observation. Okay, so we're moving then within the same realm. Peter has the same frame here.
Sorry, Anthony.
Yes. What else?
Can I share the context of James 4? I'll start in verse James 4:4. You adulterers, says, do you not understand that friendship with the world means hostility towards God?
Yes.
So whoever wants to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think it's without reason that Scripture says this? The Spirit He has caused to live in us longs jealously for us to obey. But God gives greater grace. Therefore it says, God resists the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Therefore submit to God, but resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, He will draw near to you, you double-minded people. Be miserable and mourn and weep. Your laughter must be changed into mourning and your joy into sorrow. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will exalt you. It's like these guys were copying each other.
Well, absolutely.
It's an amazing passage.
Yes. And James, of course, the James you're reading there was the half-brother of Jesus himself, so he learned it by listening to his half-brother. Yes, it does indeed sound as though they're copying.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is amazing. Word for word almost. Exactly right.
Same thing,
Message is the same.
Message is the same.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yep, the devil prowling around you, seeking whom he can devour. Resist him, firm in your faith. Verse 9, knowing that the same experiences of suffering are being accomplished by others of your brethren who are in the world. They're all in the world, these Christians struggling.
Can you define the suffering Peter might be alluding to here? Or is he talking trials and tribulations of
martyrdom in that
life,
case,
or
of course.
the faith?
All sorts of suffering. Suffering for the faith, obviously. And death was expected. Peter was supposedly crucified upside down. Paul, we know, was murdered by Nero. So we are blessed not to be attacked to the point of death right now in America. However, it can come.
You were talking about Genesis 6, Anthony.
Oh, yes.
And the 8 souls, 8 people.
Yes.
Verse 10 is quite amazing. Now may the God of all grace, who invited you to His glory.
Yes.
Isn't that incredible that after Genesis 6 and all the stuff that continues to this day, yet God keeps inviting you?
Well, these are the elect, of course. They're invited by the gospel to eternal glory. That should be the glory of the age to come. In my translation, I consistently render that word aeonios correctly as to do with the age to come. He's invited you, of course. He's always calling out, and those who accept His message then are the called, are the elect.
And then, like your paraphrase here, after you have suffered a little while,
yes,
it doesn't feel like that when you're
yeah.
Restore, establish, strengthen, and settle you.
Yeah.
I like the settle because in the land, right? Settle
yes, and it can be in varying degrees even now, because he says, if you need to be tested, earlier in the book, if you need to be tested more, you're going to be tested. Some people don't need to go through the great tribulation, literally. They could escape to somewhere else. But those who are so weak are going to have to prove their faith to death. Those are the ones who are candidates for the great tribulation time, not by going to heaven to be escaping. I'm not referring to that. But I'm referring then to an escape, as Jesus said, fleeing to the mountains and so on. In the case of those who have to be tribulated. But if we've been tried and tested enough now, then we're already qualified.
And as usual, these people were talk about sufferings, right?
Yeah.
These people in the first century.
Yeah.
But as usual, I love the doxologies, which remind me of Paul as well in verse 11. To Him be the glory, the power forever and ever. Amen.
Yeah.
After going through all this stuff, and you still, to Him be the glory.
Of course. Amazing. God through Messiah. So having this information is a very great treasure for us. So we've been enabled by the grace of God and our own researches and so on to see that there's been a makeover in the Christian faith. If if you dig down archaeologically into the history of Christianity, it suddenly becomes something quite different from the 2nd century on. And there you would read Keegan Chandler's book on the God of Jesus. This is a historical disaster, and it would account for the fact that we are different and sometimes regarded as terribly alien from the mainstream. Don't let that trouble you. Jesus was not accepted by the system either. Okay, so we've got to him be the dominion forever and ever. Amen. I love that. Excitement there. Eternal glory in verse 10 is the eternal kingdom, the kingdom of the coming age. We had glory there in verse 1, did we not? So as well as using the word sober very often, we had the word glory in verse 1, we had the word glory in verse 4, and we have the verb, the noun glory there in verse 10. The glory of the age to come. I get it. Now then, final greeting. Through Silvanus, our faithful brother, so he does commend some of his fellow Christians as faithful. They're well known for their stability.
Not all of them were backstabbers.
Not indeed they weren't.
The guy who did him great harm.
Well, no, not the fellow, the copper maker, copper smith. For so I regard him, he says. I, Peter, then put my stamp of approval on this good fellow Silvanus. I've written to you briefly. That's what they said in the book of Hebrews also, and a much longer thing, still a brief exhortation, exhorting and testifying that this is the true grace of God. This is the nearest thing that we can get to the truth today. I don't suppose we have everything exactly right, but if this is not the truth, the one God, the one Messiah Jesus, and the Kingdom of God gospel, the sleep of the dead, and I think the non-involvement in the politics of this world, that seems to be the truth. If it's not, I think we've been taken in by the simple words of Scripture, and that's not possible. So this is the true grace of God. Stand firm in it. That's amazing, isn't it? That sounds like a very active resistance to evil. Standing firm in it.
Right, not, oh well, we'll go with the crowd.
No way, that's not going to work. Then she is in Babylon. This is probably a fellow church. A church located in Babylon, that would be modern Iraq, that area, probably. She, the church, the woman, referred to here in a female capacity, chosen as elect, together with you, sends you greetings. So greetings from the church in Babylon, and my son Mark, my student Mark. Interesting. He had a time of weakness. You remember the book of Acts? He didn't continue, wanted to go home, got homesick, and so Paul decided not to take him next time round. He went with Barnabas. So he had, that's comforting to me. There were weaknesses. They had their problems. Not everybody was perfect. And Mark failed, but he obviously did much better and left us with the entire gospel, 16 chapters. Greet one another with a kiss of love. We insist on the kissing? No, of course not. That's a cultural thing. You want to do kissing, that's fine. Don't, that's fine too. But it should be a measure of affection. Greet one another with a kiss of love. Peace, shalom, wholeness, not just peace, but wholeness, completeness, be to all of you who are united to Messiah. Christ is in you. There's no place for a half-hearted or half-time or half-involved Christianism. You're either doing this flat out or you're not doing it at all. This certainly makes my Church of England experience less than biblical, because we were not whole-time Christians. We didn't know any of this material. We didn't read it, didn't talk about it, but we were good people in some very vague and I think deceitful sense. We weren't good at all. We just didn't know we weren't good. Okay, any other comments from anybody out there? Where should we go next? My sense is we should do the book of Daniel. I know we've done it recently, but I think people are not clear about the system. And so they need the book of Daniel because Jesus loved the book of Daniel. He quoted from that massively, especially chapter 7. So possibly we will do the book of Daniel verse by verse, and the kingdom will be utterly clear by the time you've done that.
Yeah. Child is asking, guess we have to address this about the second edition. When is Bishop Anthony's second edition coming out?
I don't know, when I get it done, it'll take several months yet. It requires going verse by verse, the Greek text in front of you, trying to get a translation. No translation is perfect, there'll be mistakes, but the notes particularly will, I think, keep you within the framework of the sleep of the dead, the one God, the Messiah. All of that is, I think, entirely clear. Sarah, my daughter and secretary, will be taking down a lot of this from dictation, but it will take a while. I want to get it done quickly because it pains me not to have it out there at Amazon. Also, Keegan Chandler's book, which is going quite well, My Coming Kingdom of the Messiah book, and the old version of the translation, the first edition, is being dispensed free from the college. If you want to get a couple extra copies, they're saying them out free. Meanwhile, we're waiting to get the second edition done. That will take several months yet, but thank you for your concern. Appreciate very much your listening with us.
There was a question about the James passage I read for,
yes,
where it says, don't seek friendship with the world. And, you know, how exactly would that work? What degree of community or interaction then should we have?
Well, each will make up his own mind on that. Obviously, the politics of the world, you don't want to be heavily involved in that. You don't want to be in the army machine, I think, killing people. There are other things you can reasonably do for the government, and you have to work this out on your own, obviously. Each situation is different.
Mill provided a good response from Paul.
Yes.
1 Corinthians 5, in my previous letter, I instructed you not to associate with immoral people.
Yes.
I was not referring to the immoral people of this world.
Right.
Those who are greedy, cheat others, worship idols. Otherwise, you would have to leave this world. As in die, by the way. What I meant when I wrote was that you should not associate with anyone who is called a Christian.
Yes.
Who is immoral, greedy, worships idols, abusive, drunkard, cheats others, do not even have a meal.
That's exactly right. And these people are people who are claiming to be true Christians. They are true Christians, claiming to be. He's not talking about the pagan world there, and we've discussed at length today the fact that there's a lot of Christianity out there which is not more than warmed over paganism. And if you're not going to talk to them, you'd have to go out of the world. So do not become so isolationist that you're no good to anybody. Paul has in mind that, most important in that excellent text, by the way, from our friend, the cyanide connection out there, the sugar and the cyanide connection, we appreciate his remarks. He's talking about genuine Christian believers. Don't mix with them if they are lapsed or lapsing true believers. But we should be friendly to everybody and helpful as far as we can to everybody we can. Do them good. Okay.
Question?
No?
Good. Messiah's follower. It's funny, when I was brainwashed, so to speak, so to speak.
Yes.
No, not so to speak. You were brainwashed. As a JW years ago, I never recalled the age to come being mentioned much. Only paradise on earth and the 144 anointed, like Antoine mentions.
That's very fascinating. Well, age to come is so useful. The word aionios in Greek means to do with the age to come. So the life of the age to come, Daniel 12 verse 2, is the life of that future age. But it is, of course, also the paradise, because the thief on the cross said, remember me, please, Jesus, remember me when you come bringing in your kingdom, when you come with your kingdom, or in your kingdom, doesn't matter, when you come to establish your kingdom, please remember me. And Jesus said to him, you don't have to wait till then, I'm telling you right now, as we die together on the cross, you will be with me indeed in that future paradise, which is also Revelation 2 verse 7. So the age to come is the paradise on earth, but more frequently called the age to come, hence eternal life 41 times in the New Testament, the life of the age to come, which is not heaven, but life on this earth renewed when Christ returns at his parousia. All of this should be commonplace in our conversation.
He says it's very enlightening to fully grasp the kingdom of God.
Yes.
And the way Scripture perfectly describes it.
Absolutely. And you are the kingdom, you're in training for the kingdom. You're not just going to be there and do nothing. So all the training and suffering we go through now is designed to train us with a lot of experience for that future exaltation, that future glory about which Peter speaks so often. And 2 Timothy 2:12, if we suffer with him, we shall also reign as kings with him. Marvelous material.
I don't know if you want to deal with this because we touched on cities and the devil.
Okay.
But someone says, if a person is mentally ill and they show signs of being possessed by a demon, are they really possessed or ill? When Jesus cast out demon, the daemon, the boy fell down and started twitching on the ground as if he was convulsing. Would this be a mental illness?
Well, I don't know what the intent of that question is, but demons exist, first of all. How you discern which person has a mental disease and who is actually demon influenced, better way of saying, that's something for you to deal with case by case. I've encountered demonic activity more in Africa more often than here. However, the plain point here is that do not talk about as if. It doesn't say the demons spoke to Jesus as if they existed, and Jesus spoke to the demons as if, because that's a way of saying, I don't want to believe what the text says. That becomes unbelief, that becomes refusal to accept the text of Scripture. That's dangerous. You accept the Scripture for what it plainly says, and it plainly says that demons exist as supernatural creatures. So I would urge you to help your Christadelphian friends to define the word demon, and they're not able to do it.
Randy says suffering would include resisting sin.
Absolutely.
1 Peter 4.
Yes.
Because he has suffered in the flesh, has ceased from sin, so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for the lusts of men, but for the will of God.
Of course. Yeah, you could suffer from somebody else's sins, you could suffer also from your own sins, temptations from all sorts of places. Living for God for the rest of your lives. Quite an assignment, isn't it? Quite a challenge. Anyway, I think that's probably about where we should stop.
Just a couple more.
Yes.
I'm so sure Sir Anthony has the truth. Don't be so sure. Because God answered my prayer and guided me to this site.
Yes.
How fortunate we are to have those like Anthony to guide us.
Well, we're doing the best that we can. We do try to get it right. I think there's some advantage in having had a career in a Bible college, because not only do I have 5,000 books of my own downstairs, and I'm very much cautious about being too dogmatic, but most of what we're trying to, in fact, all of what we're trying to do here is rather obvious material. That there is a devil who is not just human nature is plain and obvious to me. That there is one God is so Jewish and so Jesus-like that I rejoice in that. And so I've come up with this new term that the faith that your friends have accepted, in my estimation wrongly, is a makeover version. It's a revised version. They go to the church ostensibly to find God and Jesus preached there, but you can point out to them that the gospel of the kingdom is not resounding from their pulpits. They don't recite the Shema. They recite this strange doctrine of God being three and yet one. That's a makeover version. It's a revised version. It's an artificial version. And I would flee from that because I think it may not count when the judgment comes. We better be at least investigating to make sure.
Someone said, yes, Anthony led me to the truth. Carlos is great too.
He's laughing.
Dan says, Dan Shaw.
Yeah.
Was he a student of yours?
No, Dan Shaw was at the Bible College possibly many years.
He says that you used to use a great visual with blocks to teach the HTML.
Yes, no, we should. I will do it next week. Thank you for reminding me of that. I have 2 blocks downstairs. I'll bring them back and show that the 2 blocks should be side by side, the present evil time and the future kingdom. What has happened is that the second block has been on top of the first. So my attempt to do that now is to imagine a soccer game in which the object of the game is to kick the ball as high as you can into the air. That's silly. Or, do chickens run for president? No.
Well, some might say.
I think we all know that. Do I sing the national anthem in England? That's to say, God Save Our Gracious Queen. Is that what Americans sing? I don't think so. There are certain things that are self-evident. One is that Jesus was a Jew. And Jews lived and died for the belief that God is one single person. That's not what you're getting in church. That's the makeover version, I suggest.
Thank you for your diligence in addressing the issues associated with the theology of certain high control groups.
Yes.
Your work with Antoine Warren, former JW elder, is elucidating.
Good.
Elucidating.
That's fine. Well, we're grateful for Antoine.
And sure to provoke some critical reasoning that may unshackle fettered minds.
Wow.
That's well put.
This guy's a wordsmith.
So, if you can help us, whoever this kind person is, to go viral with this, tell your friends. We need millions of Jehovah's Witnesses to watch Antoine with his extraordinary emergence from the stifling, should we say, mindless control of the organization.
Someone said, I agree, it hits close to home with me. I think we have a lot of JWs X right now. Very nice and encouraging to ex-JWs and other Christians as well.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you so much for the encouragement.
By the way, Antoine Warren will be a speaker at next year's theological conference, which is coming rather quickly.
The date, let's give the date in advance, which is May the 3rd to the 6th, I think. In the same area, the Calvin Center here, south of where we're living, south of Atlanta. Please do come, and Antoine, we've asked him to give us a full-length talk, and his remarkable emergence from the stifling grip of a mindless control system.
157 days, 23 hours, 2 minutes. We got to count down.
To be up with the best. Okay.
While we're on the subject and while we have ex-JWs, can you mention a few pertinent remarks that could be made to a JW at your door?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, the fact that they're saying that Jesus is an angel contradicts flat the text where it's written there in Hebrews. To which of the angels did God ever say, you're my son? The answer is never. In other words, the one thing you must never, ever believe is that Jesus is an angel. And if they say, well, he's an archangel but not an angel, you simply point them to the dictionary or common sense or any English teacher in any high school, just plain common sense. We know that all angels are angels, whether they are super angels, medium rank angels, or others. They're still angels. All bees are bees, whether they're queen bees or not. That's quite clear. So that's just silly. With the level of do chickens run for president when we start arguing that he's an archangel but not an angel. You need help. The other point you can make is that the parousia, the second coming, is visible, always. It is nonsense to translate this as invisible presence. Just wrong. Every dictionary knows this. So I say to my friends sometimes, why is it that in no commentary in any language for 2,000 years anybody even imagined what you're suggesting? Are you that great that you understand the Bible better than anybody in any commentary in any language for 2,000 years? Take stock of yourself. Maybe you're not. Maybe you need to take a solid look at who you really are and not be so bold as to contradict everybody else practically, except your own tightly controlled organization, and that might be the problem.
And what about the point of not being born again?
Oh yes, thank you for that. The Bible says you must be born again. Now, Peter speaks of having been born again. It's past tense. And they say that you cannot be born again unless you're one of the 144,000. That is a catastrophic systematic order. It's to go right off the rails. So if they're not born again, they're not going to be in the kingdom. There are no two-class systems at work in the Bible. So you ask them then plainly, do you think the New Testament is written for you? Well, only indirectly, they'll say. That is quite wrong. The other one might be the celebration of the Lord's Supper, the communion service. They do it once a year. That's plainly wrong. Paul speaks about keeping the communion when you come together as a church. That's not once a year. So they are absolutely flat out in opposition to Jesus, who said, you're to do what I say. When they get up and read once a year about the breaking of the bread and the drinking of the wine, they read it aloud, and the public is invited, and then they solemnly pass the glass of wine and nobody takes it. We're in Mad Hatter land here. I wish they would simply say, that's got to be wrong. That's absurd, because salvation is by obedience to Jesus. And if you're going to shake your fist at Jesus and say, I'm not taking that one, because only the 140, well, think again. You're not that smart, nor are your leaders, to contradict every commentary for 2,000 years in any language. You're not that brilliant. Don't be that clever. Learn from some other people and get those things right. So
yeah, one of the many things Antoine is teaching is the notion about born again.
Yes.
They only apply this to the so-called 144.
Yes, right.
And being born again entails the Spirit of God living in you. Right?
Yes.
You're born through and via the Spirit of God. And one of the good passages you can try, Antoine says, is Romans 8, which Paul talks about those who are walking according to the flesh, who do not have the Spirit of God, commit all kinds of, immoral, and JWs are very ethical, moral people. So that's a good challenge. If it says you are not in the flesh but in the Spirit, if the Spirit of God lives in you. Now, if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, so then Paul, as he usually does, mixes the Spirit of God with the Spirit of Christ.
Same thing.
And then his challenge to JWs would be then, are you following Christ?
Of course.
Because it says you're supposed to have the Spirit of Christ. Or do you belong to Christ? Because then it says this person does not belong to Christ. If you don't have the
clear
Spirit.
enough. So that's a very good one to do at the door. Okay, you ask the person at the door, do you have the Spirit of Christ?
Yes.
And they say, well, no, because I'm not one of the 144,000. You then read that text which says you are not a Christian. Plainly, you are not a Christian, period. If you say, I don't have the Spirit of Christ.
And just to chip in, I have a mnemonic, not a demonic.
No, a mnemonic, a memory device.
Hebrews 1:5, Hebrews 5:1.
Good.
Hebrews 1:5, Hebrews 5:1.
That's about the Son of God?
Yeah, Hebrews 1:5, to which of the angels.
Yes.
And Hebrews 5:1,
Good.
priests only come from human beings, not angels. So
that's right. So work away with your good friends, kindly, gently at the door. And you might want to go to the video where I was filmed speaking Jehovah's Witnesses at the door. And they were very decent to me, very kind. But they're simply deceived. One of my points is that they need to get a more realistic assessment of who they are.
Just quickly, how do we respectfully address their conflation, JWs, of God with visible organization?
Well, you only do it by chipping away at the edges. You've got to get them to see that some of these major teachings are flat contradictory to the Bible. That's the only thing you could do with any system. It was only kind Christadelphians came to us way back in 1980-something and said that we're wrong on who the Son of God was. You chip away at the system. And you hope that with prayer and diligence and care, you can get to a point which is sensitive for them. This will come, I think, in greater degree when we get some of these videos, Antoine's included. So his ministry, from my angle, is very important because he sees clearly now how deceived he's been. So there's no magic bullet that's going to work here. Just keep at it.
Antoine can answer this better than I can, but I believe their loyalty is stressed to be to the organization.
Yes.
Is that not true?
Yeah, it's the mother.
Yeah.
She spoke.
The mother.
Their mother.
Well, that
And-
should
and
be a
light.
wake-up call.
And light can only come.
Right.
They're big on this light thing, old light, versus
Yes.
Eli, and that can only come through the organization,
Yes.
who's called the mother in their literature.
So
So if you, the point is, a child of the 80s is a former JW. The point is, that question about conflating God with, the point is that when you leave the JWs, you have left God.
Yes.
So that's what they say.
Yes.
That's why they won't even deal with an apostate. They will deal with unbelievers, but they won't even talk to an apostate. And that's where shunning comes in.
Okay.